The second day of the 2019 NHL Draft brought us all kinds of trade activity and some fairly significant NHL trades, but there's still plenty more that we likely could see between now and free agency. In today's report, we're going to go over all the latest NHL trade rumors, as well as some key free agent rumors as the window opens for free agents to speak to other teams. We'll get into all the latest coming up next. Welcome back here to Top Shelf Hockey. So we should be in store for a very busy NHL news cycle between now and free agency on July the 1st. Today, as I record this, is the 23rd of June. So today is the opening of the free agent window where they can speak to other teams. That's unrestricted free agents only, of course. Restricted free agents are allowed to speak with other teams starting this coming Wednesday. So obviously, there's going to be a lot of speculation about where players are going to end up signing. And we're going to start here with Matt Duchene. Obviously, we saw the Nashville Predators make a mega deal yesterday, unloading the $9 million contract of defenseman PK Subban, who was traded over to the New Jersey Devils. So many feel that that's the opening that the Predators need to go after a player like Duchene. They've been linked already. We know Duchene loves Nashville, loves country music, spends a lot of time visiting the city during the off time. So it's not going to be a major surprise if they're able to lock him up here on likely a 7-year contract would be my guess. It's probably going to take somewhere around 9.5 at least to get things going. Wouldn't be surprised if he ends up signing for 10, maybe even a little bit more. Based on some of these other contracts we've seen, I think we've certainly pushed up his value thanks to other players, especially like Kevin Hayes. That contract, in my opinion, was a little bit too much. And when you compare the two and how much more offensive Duchene can be, then I think he's going to be looking at minimum 9.5, but probably 10 or slightly above is likely where it's going to come in. I expect Columbus to still remain competitive here to try to retain Duchene, but I do think it's possible here, seeing the exit of many of the other guys that were also free agents in Columbus, at least what's expected to happen, that more than likely he departs, goes to Nashville where he feels he has a better chance to win and gets a very comparable, if not more money on a contract here. So the one advantage Columbus has is they can do the 8 years, whereas Nashville can only do the 7. So we'll see what happens with Matt Duchene, but he is expected to be meeting here with Nashville. I'm not sure the exact time frame when the meeting's supposed to be, but they are expected to be chatting here in a relatively near future. Now, the San Jose Sharks are a team that's expected to make some more moves. Of course, they signed that mega contract to Erik Karlsson. They still have a fair bit of other contracts to look after. We saw them already make some trades already. Apparently, the Sharks are open to trading a few other defensemen, and that includes Dylan and Ryan. Keep in mind, when you have defensemen like Burns and Karlsson and Vlasic, they're going to eat up so much ice time that you don't really need a whole lot of players with a ton of experience in those other 3 spots. Obviously, you do need some experience back there. They all need defense partners that can kind of keep up here. It's an opportunity for them to shed salary and fit in some of their other free agents of the forward group that really need to be signed here. They still have Captain Joe Pavelski. There's Joe Thornton. There's Nyquist doesn't have a contract. I would imagine Nyquist likely doesn't come back. I'm sure Pavelski and Thornton both would like to return, so they need to find some money here to be able to get them paid appropriately. Not too concerned over Thornton. I think he'll wait things out and probably come to terms on a 1-year contract or something like that. But Pavelski, apparently the issue there has been term. They need to talk here and we'll iron out an extension. Even though he's a little bit older, he's still very productive, and we'll see what the Sharks can do to keep him in the fold here. But they are open to trading a couple more of their defensemen, so we very well might be seeing some more deals coming out of San Jose. Now, as we've seen here over the last number of days, the Vancouver Canucks have been linked to a ton of players. We did see a trade from them acquiring JT Miller here at the draft, which will probably be a good help to their forward group, even though I wasn't a huge fan of the price tag that they gave up to get it. I'm not a real big fan of giving up that first-round pick for a player of that caliber, but they've also been linked to a lot of defensemen, and of course, I think it's fair to say they're probably out now on Tyson Barrie, the Avalanche. I do think there's a pretty good chance that Tyson Barrie does get traded. I just don't see it happening now with Vancouver. Some of the forwards that they were likely to be looking at, if you're Colorado, would include probably Bo Horvat, and I just don't see the Canucks wanting to go there. It was believed that they were offering their first-round pick from the 19 draft here, as well as maybe a piece like a Jake Virtanen, and it's been reported that Colorado was not interested in that. They might have been interested in the first-round pick, but they didn't really care to have Virtanen, and they probably couldn't come to terms on what the other piece would need to be to go with that first-rounder. But now that that first-rounder's been used, more likely they're out on that. They are expected to be meeting with free agent defenseman Tyler Myers here pretty quickly into the free agent period. Obviously, he's a right shot defenseman, gets a lot of size. I am a little bit concerned they could end up overpaying for his services, so hopefully that doesn't happen. He could potentially be a good fit on the Canuck blue line, but right now that appears to be the direction they're heading. If meetings go well and they feel like they can sign him for a pretty decent price tag, then we might not hear the Canucks going after a right shot D in the trade rumors anymore, because obviously that would satisfy what the team is looking for. But I guess we will see here how things things go, but they are expected to be chatting here with Tyler Myers to see if they can grab another asset here through free agency. Now, staying with the Avalanche and Tyson Barrie momentarily, where it now appears as though that the Canucks are out of the picture in a trade, and we obviously saw the Devils acquire PK Subban. That certainly changes the market a little bit for Barrie. There's still teams looking for a right-shot defenseman, but it certainly does narrow it down here a little bit. I don't think the Avalanche are in a spot where they have to trade him. Obviously, they get a lot of good young D. He's in his final year of his contract, and he might be kind of pricing himself out of Colorado between the contract and obviously what they want to offer for playing time to a lot of their younger guys. But I guess we will see what happens here. There's not a given that he gets traded. They very well might hang on to him for this year. See how the season goes. He could be a trade deadline acquisition for another team, or the Avalanche may just hold on to him as their own rental and see how this year goes and explore things beyond that later on a new deal or moving on from him or whatever may happen. But we'll see what happens with Tyson Barrie. But I do think it's still possible he gets moved, just a little bit less likely now with fewer trading partners involved. Now, the Edmonton Oilers, of course, are still interested in trading Jesse Puljujarvi as per his request. However, it does sound like comments from Ken Holland indicate he's not really afraid or scared to let him go play in Europe for a year. They're not going to just give him away. They need the right deal to make sense. I've heard a couple of different reports indicating that they might accept like a second-round pick for him. But now that we're past the draft and it's not something the Oilers could take, I don't know if they'd want a second-round pick in a future draft. I mean, it is possible, but not likely. I think the Oilers would probably prefer somebody who can play in their lineup right away, preferably a top 9 forward. Obviously, that's where Puljujarvi would slot if he was playing. And obviously, his development hasn't gone as planned here, but like I've said in other videos, I think as part of that is on the player as well as the team. So we'll see if he gets moved, but one team that apparently has expressed interest or at least checked in to see what the cost would be is the Pittsburgh Penguins, which really shouldn't come as a big surprise. They're always looking to get younger here and at the same time shed some salary and have players who can come on board here with cheaper contracts. So he could potentially be a good fit there. Don't really know how trade talks went. Obviously not well enough to make a deal, but we'll see if they potentially circle back and express interest here in the future. But there's certainly a number of teams I think that have checked in on him, but I'm not sure exactly when we'll see a deal or if we'll see a deal. I think Ken Holland might just hold on here. If he can get what he wants, fine. If not, let him go play in Europe and see if he can boost his value here, because as we know, Puljujarvi hasn't really had a whole lot of success. He's not established. His development's been stalled, so that's not really putting a whole lot on his value. So he could potentially hang on to him and maybe get better value later if other teams can kind of see some improvement. Now, with the William Karlsson signing here by the Vegas Golden Knights, of course, that signing's not 100% confirmed yet, but getting him an 8-year contract of $5.9 million is just going to create that much more of a necessity for them to make some trades. Obviously, with the cap coming in lower this year at $81.5 million, that puts the Golden Knights about $1.5 million or so above the cap already for next season. Now, they can be about 10% above throughout the summertime, but we'll have to be cap compliant before the season starts. So obviously, that gives them a little bit of time to make some decisions here. But they are going to have to make some trades. They're still talking about that some players like Colin Miller, right shot defenseman, kind of falling out of favor, could very well be moved. We've heard forwards like Eric Halla or Cody Eakin could be moved. We've even heard Max Pacioretty in trade talk as well. I think it's a little less likely that he gets moved, but at the same time, moving on a more significant contract would certainly free up a lot more space and have, you know, potentially a little bit less disruption on the team here. But I guess we will see. The Vegas Golden Knights are a team to watch. This Karlsson contract, even though it's a pretty good deal in my opinion, certainly puts the pressure on them to get something done. Of course, keep in mind they also have the David Clarkson contract here as well. Obviously, that could go on long-term injury reserve to free up some space that way, which would temporarily allow them to be over the cap by the full amount of the contract. But there is some other restrictions there that when it comes to calling up players, or doesn't really give them as much flexibility as moving the contract would be. So obviously we had seen before from Jesse Granger, who covers the Golden Knights, that Clarkson had to provide his list of teams for his no trade clause that was included in his contract. I know many people chuckled at that and couldn't understand why, because he's never going to play again. So why would he care who pays him? Well, the big difference here is the income tax thing. Obviously, some states in the U.S. have much more favorable taxes or no taxes in some cases. So obviously, if he's traded to a different team, that could actually have an impact on his take-home pay. So obviously, that does play a role here. It might prove a little bit trickier for the Golden Knights to move the contract. So it is quite likely that it could end up on LTIR. They give them the cap relief that way, just not as much flexibility as moving it all together. I wouldn't rule out the possibility that it does get moved, but I just think it's going to be a little bit trickier since they're one of the more favorable teams on the tax this year that could have an impact on him. But at the same time, his contract isn't a full no move, so they do have some flexibility that way. But just another tool they have at their disposal here to kind of free up some space. There's still rumblings about a few other players being traded, like Leafs defenseman Nikita Zaitsev, as well as Buffalo Sabres defenseman Rasmus Ristolainen. Although things kind of have cooled down here a little bit, there really hasn't been a whole lot mentioned except that they're still being shopped. You could probably throw Jason Zucker, the Minnesota Wild, into that category as well. I do think there's still a possibility all of these guys could be traded. Not a given, of course, but obviously right now teams likely for today and the next couple days are probably focusing more so on that free agent open period where they can speak to players from other teams about potential contracts. And then as they kind of get those things sorted out, we'll likely start hearing more rumblings about some trades. Probably see some more activity as we head closer to July 1st for free agency here, when some of these deals can actually be signed. But there's lots of other players that are still being discussed, and there's, I'm sure, lots of seeds that were planted at the draft. We saw all kinds of chatter amongst the GMs. Good opportunity when they're all in the same place at the same time. They have lots of talk that way, and we could see some of those seeds maybe come to fruition here a little bit later as they get into more trade talk as free agency comes around. Of course, as always, I want to hear your thoughts and opinions down below in the comment section about everything discussed here today. What do you think of some of these potential trades and free agent signings that we might see coming up here over the next little while? Of course, if you're new to the channel as well, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams, and there's plenty of content here for all hockey fans to enjoy. So stay tuned to the channel for all the NHL's breaking news. We'll have all kinds of content posted here as we approach free agency and keep you all up to date. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.